Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining the live stream this evening, where we're going to be running through the plans for WildArt 2023. So I've got Josh lined up, ready to co-host this evening's event. So we'll get down to it right after this. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Rob. Good to see you.
How you doing? Yeah, we've been having a few issues with the video feed, so there's been a bit of a delay. So if that's sort of continues, then apologies, but we'll just have to work with what we've got. But anyway, how you doing?
Doing well. It's not too bad. It's we had some record low temperatures yesterday here on the East Coast. It was pretty brisk, but it's warming up today, so
Yeah.
not too bad.
Yeah, we've had sort of well, what I think is probably the first bit of spring sunshine. You know, when you get that, it gets to that point where the sun gets up to a higher angle in the sky, and all of a sudden you think, "Oh, spring's on the way." You know, the bird song changes. You know, and it sort of the bird song sort of sounds a lot more optimistic all of a sudden, and yeah, you get this real spring feeling. So yeah, it's been good today, and I think it's set for the rest of the week here. So
Nice.
so that'll be nice. And the snowdrops are up, and yes, the spring's on the way, and WildArt 2023 is on the way.
All right.
So do drop by, say hello, and this is the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have as we run through things this evening. So what I'm going to do is run through things like the categories, the judges, the prizes, timings and everything else. So we'll do that. And also Josh and I will share a bit of photography as well, just to break things up a little bit and give you the opportunity to type your questions into the chat. So do make sure you do that, and I'll try my best to answer any queries that you might have. But last weekend was great, wasn't it? The winners presentation. I mean, what we had such great photography, didn't we?
Yeah, it was amazing, and the decisions were so hard. I mean, the content was through the roof this past year. It was really excellent. When you look at the standard, I mean, it's second to none.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of comes around this year. That's for sure. So I've got some new things, and yeah. I think there's a few comments coming in, so let me just deal with those before we get going. So JG says, good evening, Rob and everyone. Good evening. Alan James says, hi, Rob and Josh. Hi, Alan. Lukasz Jablonski, hi, Rob. Do you plan to publish collection 2? Photo book was amazing. So, well, we'll get to that later on, Lukasz. And I did reply to your email, actually. And Bianca Blanc says, hi, Rob and Josh. Hi, Bianca. Hope you're well. Let's start with dealing with the categories for next year, because I've made a few changes, and what I've decided to do is to adopt the KISS principle. So keep it simple, stupid. I need to keep things simple, because what I did find last year was that to run so many categories was it put real pressure on my time, and I want to do everything that I do well. So I'm going to reduce the categories down to 8 this year. So if I share this screen with everybody, it basically highlights the categories that we're going to run. So there are a few new ones, as you'll see in the slide that I've got. But the first one we're going to run will be light, and that will close at the end of March. So when you see the month after the category title, that denotes the month which it'll close in. So light will be the 31st of March, wet will be the 30th of April, airborne 31st of May, and so on. So I think that people, the categories we've run before, I think people understand those. And if you don't, then do go and have a look at the website and have a look at the images that, in the top 100 and the images that have won those categories before, because that'll give you a really good idea of what those categories are all about. But as you'll see, there are some new ones in there. So let's deal with those. And the first one is one of my ideas, actually. I'm quite proud of this one. And it's airborne. And I thought when I did Bird Photographer of the Year, we did a category called Birds in Flight, which probably people will be aware of. And that was a really good category. And I thought, how can we incorporate something like that within the competition, but be a bit broader with it? And I thought airborne, was perhaps a good title. So it's basically the relationship between wildlife and the air. So it's birds in flight, it's jumping mammals, it's butterflies in flight, it's could be seeds blowing in the wind, that sort of thing. So as long as it's in the air, that's what that category is all about. So I think give people some fresh challenges this year. So I was quite proud of that one, because I think you like the birds in flight category in Bee Potty, didn't you, Josh?
Yeah, it's a great category, and this is actually pretty exciting too when I think of it, because there's a lot of wildlife shots that are out there, nature shots that can interpret it literally, but there's some pretty interesting interpretations I think you can
Yeah.
make on airborne. So it should be fun to see what the submissions are.
Yeah, and don't forget that this is it's an artistic competition, so these categories are open to interpretation to a degree. So don't be shy. Think outside the box, and I'm really excited to see what comes in that category. So yeah, it should be really good. Then we've got color, and as I said, we've run that before. Then the next one is tiny. Now I wanted to incorporate something that covered the sort of macro elements of wildlife photography. Sorry, you probably hear Sky barking in the background. Yeah, so I wanted to incorporate something that covered that sort of macro photography area, but rather than call it macro, which is a little bit boring, I think, is sort of use another term. And this is actually one of the new judges came up with this, and we'll get to that later. But yeah, so tiny, I think, not only covers macro, but it could there's a bit of a crossover with space, perhaps. So if you had a mammal which was really tiny in the frame, I mean, wolves in Yellowstone, maybe, because you can't get close to them generally.
Pepper flakes, yeah.
Yeah, pepper flakes. Think outside the box, with that. So it's macro photography, it's things small in the frame. These categories are open to entrant interpretation. Then we've got abstracts, which obviously we've run before. Then the third new category we've got for this year is something that I've called naturescapes, because what I found was we had a lot of landscape style photography, which was covering things like ice blocks on the beach, that in Iceland, that sort of thing, which was really, really nice, or sort of frozen ice, and they were really nice, but they had nothing living in them. But I thought, well, then we need to have a category, I think, that incorporates that sort of thing. So it could be a nature landscape, it could be frozen ice and the patterns that makes. It could be ice blocks on a beach with the incoming surf, those sorts of things, all those bits and pieces that aren't really necessarily purely focused on wildlife, and the wildlife's not obvious, but celebrates those habitats and sort of scenic shots. So that's new, and I hope people sort of understand where I'm coming from with that. So if you've got something where perhaps wildlife isn't the most prominent thing in the frame, then but it's that sort of crossover, that sort of nature landscape type shot, then that's the category for it. So I hope that's sort of pretty clear. But if anybody has any questions about any of the categories, then do type it in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer the questions that come up. So have a sort of look at those categories, have a think about them, and then ask any questions that you might have. Right, one more comment coming in. Ben Pullitz is on. Hi, Rob and Josh. Naturescape sounds really cool. Well, good. And I hope we see some nice images from you, but I'm sure we will, Ben, in that category. So, Josh, should we what I thought we'd do as well is that Josh has sent me a few images, and I've picked a few of my own from last year, my favorite images, and we thought we'd sort of break this up by sharing a bit of photography. So while you digest the categories and think of any questions that you might have, why don't we share an image, Josh, and just talk about it? I think we might have one of yours actually.
Sure, sounds good.
Coming up first. Oh, this is awesome. This is not from your new place, is it?
It is actually.
Yeah, what it
And
might be.
the reason why I sent this one, we were talking a little bit about projects and what we were focusing on in the last podcast, the wildlife inspired podcast, the wildlife photography podcast.
Wildlife
And
inspired? What's that?
I know, right? I'm giving unintentional plug. No, wildlife photography podcast. And yeah, this was
Scott
actually.
Keys, who's he?
I know, right? Yeah, and I took this. This was about a month or so ago, and I've got Western exposures out back, and some of the sunsets are amazing. And some of the best shooting is actually just after sunset. This was taken in twilight when the sun went down. There weren't many clouds in the sky, but there was a nice orange glow. And this is actually a bufflehead duck. I've got a lot of them out back, and they're actually these ducks pair up on their wintering grounds, which in this case is the Chesapeake Bay. So there were the males and the females were kind of flying at each other, displaying. And this was kind of in sequence of that. One male was flying over to a female just above. What I liked about the shot, I did a pano crop, but what I liked about the shot were the textures in the water, the contrail behind it. You see a lot of contrails, but this one looked kind of unique, and the light was great as well.
Yeah, I love those. You can see where it's sort of gone with its feet across the water, because it's sort of skittish across the water. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And this would be great in light, actually, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
sort
absolutely.
of silhouettes. You know, yeah.
For sure.
Because we're not running silhouettes this year, but I mean, I guess one thing to say is, these categories that we've run before aren't necessarily gone forever. But I like to, rotate things around a little bit, because otherwise, it gets very repetitive and samey. We like to give people new challenges. So that's what, some of these categories we run before will probably come back again at some point. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of rotational thing. But no, I love this. I think it's really simple graphic, and it's really graphic. And the funny thing is, I think simplicity perhaps is that, is one of the most dramatic elements of photography, isn't it? When something is simple. Yeah. I mean, take that Starling image from the Young Award, for example, last week. Simple, graphic, strong, this similar sort of thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think when it comes to silhouettes, you want to distinguish or have a silhouette that distinguishes what the animal is, right? So what's that?
Cheers. I'm back on the red wine. It's February. So dry January's over, people. Thank goodness. Anyway, so JG says, do you have to enter every category? No, you can choose which categories you want to enter. Enter one, enter all 8, and enter as many or as few as you like. It just depends on, I guess, the catalog that you've got to choose from. What this does do, I guess, is because we're doing categories throughout the year, it does give you an opportunity to look at the category and shoot specifically for it, which is actually something I would recommend doing, is have the category title in mind, when you go out and, and shoot specifically for it, because I think that, it can give you an edge. It can give you an edge.
I think it'll be interesting, Rob, to see what comes in, especially in tiny. And when you were just talking about the new categories, tiny and the naturescapes. Yeah. In light of some of the material we've seen in different categories over the past 2 years, I think there would be very strong categories.
Yeah, I think so too. And I wanted, because having done a couple of years now, you sort of get a feel for what comes in, and the artistic images that from various sort of genres of wildlife photography that are that are coming in. And I think, yeah, you're right. I think tiny is going to be very, very strong, and it'll be very, very focused in a particular area. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And as I said, we can rotate these, as the competition develops, and we go through, future years. So, these things all come and go and come back again, perhaps sort of later on. But no, I think tiny is going to be a really good one.
Yeah.
Going to be a really good one. So let's talk about, I'll leave that image up on the screen for everybody to enjoy. But let's talk about judges. So judges this year will be everybody who's judged in the previous couple of years. They're still on the team, but I thought what we'd do is we'd bring in, a few new judges. For example, we have Michael Sneddick, who's joining the team this year. So for those of you that don't know Michael, he's he's a Nikon tutor and photographic tour leader who's based in Australia. So he's very experienced in places like Africa, and I think he's just been to the Antarctic and all these sorts. Anyway, he's Svalbard. He's been to a lot, and those sorts of things. So, he's a very experienced guy, and I think will be a very good addition to the team. And everybody will remember Tomasz Konks Beatrix from last year, and the young entries and the amazing photography that he was entering all the time. And I got in touch with him, and I thought, what better person to take the lead with the young photographers and the young judging. So he's agreed to come on and and sort of take charge of the of the young categories. So he'll be going through all those images and then liaising with the rest of the judging team, as and when they, we pick the winners for those. So really pleased to have him on board. I'm talking to somebody else at the moment, and I did agree with him that he would come on for this year, but I'm still waiting for confirmation of that. He's probably away on a trip at the moment. So it's an underwater specialist. So I think, that would really add, to the judging team, bearing in mind the amount of underwater photographs that we get, particularly things like wet and color. We've seen a lot of underwater stuff. So yeah, and there are a couple of other people that I'm talking to. So I will announce judges as we go along. But the idea this year is, rather than having an individual judge in charge of an individual category, what I found last year was that because we've now come out of COVID, with fingers crossed, people were getting a lot busier, because a lot of the judges are running tours or they've got other commitments. So rather than setting them particular categories, I thought what I'd do is see when those judges were available throughout the course of the year, and then put teams of sort of 3 or 4 together for each category and do it that way. So that's basically what we're going to do. Each category, I'll put a team of people together based on their availability, and then at the end of the year, obviously, we'll come on. We'll have a sort of group discussion as we've done in the last couple of years, to pick the winners. So that's effectively what's going to happen, with the judging process. So, yeah. I mean, have you found the judging process, Josh? You've really enjoyed it, haven't you?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, in some cases, some months we'll go through a contest and everybody's on the same page. Boom, that's the image. Other times it's very iterative because, again, there's just so much good content,
Yeah.
and all of the judges have different perspectives in terms of what they like. And all that obviously comes together at the end when we're choosing the overall winner. So
Yeah,
it's a really fun process.
Let me just take that image away for a second, because I'll while people are sort of taking in what we've talked about, let me just share one of mine. Present. Sorry, professionals. We've got rid of the share screen. Hang on, there we go. So this, for me, I think is I think people have seen quite a lot of my waterbird stuff, but it was at the beginning of last year, the waterbirds in my local lakes really sort of got me back into the sort of cycle of photography again, and got me out of this sort of downward spiral and got me sort of motivated again, I guess. And I've got a lot of sort of dark stuff. I'm a bit like the coot behind me. I thought I better not share too much dark stuff, because I've got another image which is well, pretty black apart from the subject. So I thought, well, I'll do something a little different. And this is probably one of my favorite swan images from last year. It's just that sort of dawn light in the winter is just amazing on when you get those sort of beautiful, cold, crisp mornings where that you get plenty of mist, where where it's rising off the water as the sort of sun's coming up. And I love using it with the backlighting. And this to me is just tranquil and calm and beautiful, and that's how I see these sort of local lakes, really. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because it's just one of my favorite pictures from
Light's
last year.
amazing, Rob, and I love the shape of swans. I have some tundra swans out back, and this is inspiring me to get out there and shoot them more. I mean, they're amazing, amazing birds. Love the shape
Yeah,
on this one.
yeah. No, they're so elegant, aren't they? With that neck and what have you. So yeah, no, it's it. And these lakes are. I mean, they're just great places at time. I mean, the winter's just fabulous, and every now and again you'll see an otter as well. I think this morning, this morning as I took this picture, I think I had an otter encounter, and they'll come
Sweet.
right close sometimes, which is really good. In
Yeah.
fact, I was down there about a week ago, and there were quite a few photographers there, and of course they're all after otters. And this guy wandered around with a pair of binoculars, and he says, sort of saw me with the camera and the long lens and everything else. He said, "Oh, you're after otters?" I said, "No, actually, I'm want to photograph the birds." And he said, "Oh, that makes a nice change. Everybody around here just wants to photograph the otters." I said, "Well, if I get the opportunity, I will, but no, it's the birds I want to photograph, and concentrate on." So, yeah,
And these
anyway,
are mute swans, right, Rob? I believe.
yeah, mute swans. So, what have we got? Okay, we've got a couple of comments coming in. Okay, so JG said that's a really wonderful image, Josh. And discover nature now. I've got a flying bird picture with some special lights. Is it bad if I put it into the lights category? Well, as with anything, I think that when you're looking at categories, the interpretation is down to the entrant. I mean, not knowing and not seeing the picture, it's difficult for us to judge, and we're not here to advise you which category to put it in. That's got to be your choice. So think about what category you think it would fit best and where it would be strongest. Is it is it more about the light, or is it more about the flight? Perhaps is the way to answer that question. Would you agree, Josh?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's part of the challenge when it comes to contests is figuring out a lot of images that we've seen over the past 2 years. They could go in multiple categories. It comes down to the photographer choosing which one fits the best brief,
Yeah.
or fits the brief best, I should say. And we've seen images, Rob. We've talked about this a lot. I recall over the past 2 years, actually, the past two competitions, where we would have an image come in and it's so strong, and we would all say, well, this would be even better. Maybe it wouldn't be commended or highly commended. Maybe it would even be a winner if it were in potentially another category.
Yeah.
So choosing the category is a big decision.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it so many times, not only in this competition, but in other competitions I've been involved in, where you just see an image and you just think, why is that not in that category? Because it fits it so much better, and it would do really well in that category. It's not really the category, the category they've entered it into isn't the best for it, and there are stronger images that suit the category title better. And so when you get down to the last sort of 100 or 50 images, or the margins are really small, as we've talked about before. And if you've got an image that fits the category slightly better than the next image, that's the image that's going to go through, because it is all about the category title. We keep there are many times that we've all been talking about images, when we've been in these sort of judging discussions, and we've gone, that's a fantastic picture, but then somebody chimes in and says, well, yeah, but we've got to think about the category. Which image best fits the category? Is it X or Y? So yeah, you really need to think very, very carefully about the category titles, and make sure you're choosing the best, the category that best fits the image that you've got. And ask other people, ask your friends, give them get another opinion, because we all, I think there some people, and I'm exactly the same, and I'm guilty of this. Some people have got an image and they want to make it fit a category because they think it's a really strong image. The answer to that might be that it may not fit any of the categories that are in the competition very well. So it might be a strong image, but this is a competition, so you might not make it to those sort of final stages, no matter how strong that image is, because it just doesn't quite fit the category brief. So just think really, really carefully about that. And I think we covered that, didn't we, on the podcast that we did about photography
Yeah.
competitions? It's one of the things we talked about, quite a lot. So yeah. Okay, so JG says, beautiful shot, Rob. Thank you very much. Yeah, I like it. Right, let's talk about let's run through the prizes. Now, this year's been quite difficult. We all know what the economic situation is, and sponsorship isn't easy at the best of times. And this is partly the reason that it's taken a little bit of extra time this year to get things sorted. What I can say is that OM System have very, very kindly continued their sponsorship for the competition, as have Swarovski Optic, and as have Cotton Carrier. So we have those three sponsors who are providing prizes. So OM System are going to provide $5,000 worth of camera equipment, or $5,000. And that really depends on the ease of getting equipment to people, depending on where they are in the world. And I think if, like, obviously Simone Baumeister is in Germany, and she obviously won our best portfolio category this year, which was sponsored by OM. So they've got no problem in sending the kit to Germany. But there are certain places in the world where it's quite difficult for a UK-based branch of OM to get kit to certain places in the world. So they basically said to me, well, that's fine, if kit's not, if getting the kit's not a problem, it's $5,000 worth of OM kit, or perhaps a cash equivalent if there are problems. So they very kindly offered to donate that as a prize. So I'm extremely grateful to them for their continued support, as I am of Swarovski Optic, who are going to provide 2 binoculars. So one is going to be for an adult prize. The other one is going to be for the young award, as they've done in the previous couple of years. So that's the sort of CL, the small ones, the companion ones. The other is I've got it written down here somewhere. Where are we? Yeah, it's EL. What they're giving is EL Pures 8x42s. So they're worth about £2,500.
Yeah, those are great binos.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're just they are the Rolls Royce of of binoculars, and they've been so supportive, and they've been so supportive of me and the projects that I've been involved with over the years. So I can't thank them enough, for that. It's fantastic. And Cotton Carrier again are going to support the competition and the categories with their camera harness. So they've got a camera and binocular harness, which is worth I think it's about £150, something like that, which I think was the same model that that we gave away this year. So my thanks go to them. So what I thought we'd do this year is we're going to keep it simple. So we're simply doing the 8 categories, the 8 theme categories, for which there will be gold, silver, bronze, and Founder's Choice awards. For those awards, the gold is either going to be £250, or it's going to be a prize of equivalent value, because what I'm hoping is that sponsors will come in and give spot prizes for sponsoring various categories. As I said, it's quite difficult to get people to come on board and commit 8 times £250 in the current climate, because it's extremely difficult. But that's what I'm hoping. So it's either going to be cash, or it's going to be a prize of equivalent value, depending upon who I can attract throughout the course of the year, to come and support the competition. So I'm working on that as we go through it. The silver prize will be the camera harness from Cotton Carrier. The bronze will be a copy of Volume 1, the book. So I'll send that to people, wherever they are around the world. I'll send that out. And the Founder's Choice Award, you get entrance into the final. And don't forget that Jan Pieker was a Founder's Choice Award winner. And guess what? He ended up winning the overall title. So, he did very, very well out of that. So that buys you a place into the final. So what I'm going to do for the final this year is the overall WildArt Photographer of the Year will get the OM System prize. So the $5,000 or the $5,000 worth of OM System gear. I'm also going to run a Founder's Choice overall winner this year, who will get the binoculars from Swarovski. So those £2,500 worth of binoculars from Swarovski. And the young winner will get the other set of binoculars from Swarovski. So those are the prizes this year. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, a few questions coming in. Right, Discover Nature Now. Thanks. Are pictures covering urban wildlife with streetlights better in the category lights or color? You know, again, it's difficult to give you advice on individual categories because we haven't seen the pictures. Judges can't give advice prior to you entering the competition. All we can do is give you advice on the categories rather than, you know, individual images. Part of the skill of a competition is looking at the categories, looking at the descriptions, looking at what's been entered before, if those categories have run before, and choosing the images that you feel best suit that category. And there's nothing stopping you entering those images into both categories. So if you've got a particular image, you think, oh, is it light or is it color in this instance? Then you can enter it into both categories. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But it really is down to, you know, judges aren't going to help you choose the category to, you know, that you should enter an image into. It's part of the skill of entering a competition, is interpreting those categories and choosing, you know, what you think the image best fits. And as I said, if it fits both, and then why not enter it into both categories? So Alan James, is there a limit to how long ago the pictures were taken, as I don't get out much now due to the health and my best pictures are taken at the time? No, Alan, there's no time limit. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to, you know, to I guess police is the wrong word, but if you put a rule in like that, it is quite a difficult thing to put. And I don't think there should be any restriction. I mean, if it's a good photo, what does it matter whether it's taken 10 years ago? There's it was a good example of that. With Jeff Simpson took an image on film about 20 years ago of a deer, which he then obviously he then scanned in and he sent the digital file in, and that's in the book. That's in the first book.
Yeah, it's an amazing shot. I remember
it's
that
a really
shot.
good, really good shot. So I mean, you know, I guess that I think he did tell me how long ago it was. It was quite a while. I think it was about. I think he might have taken it in the 90s. So just goes to show. I mean, images are timeless, aren't they? Particularly wildlife. So no time limit, Alan. So fill your boots. Cannaboom says, never underestimate a founder's choice. Ask Jan. Yes. Yes, Jan, never underestimate the founder's choice. It's funny, isn't it? How the founder chooses the overall winner. No. That was an amazing image. You see, that was what we wanted was, and why we put all the sort of bronze, silver, gold, and Founder's Choice Awards into the final, is that we wanted a bigger selection to choose from. And when we came to picking the images in those orders for the categories, the category title had a lot to do with how we selected those images. And I think when you're dealing with the overall title, you know, those other images should come into play, because, you know, it's about the overall title rather than the individual category, which one picture might have suited a little bit better than the other picture, which is, you know, as I said, you know, it's very, very wafer thin, isn't it? When you get down to picking sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the categories with so many, you know, with so many great images. So, yeah. So all those images, again, will go through to the final. So gold, silver, bronze, and Founder's Choice in each of the categories will go through to the final. So not 40 this time, but obviously 4 times 8. So, you know, it's so 32, you know, will go through into the final, you know, this year from those categories. Okay. So as I said, if you do have any other questions, then pop them in the chat. You know, and we'll get round to answering those, you know, as we go through. Right. Let me, for a second, just move this on to another one of your images while people digest that. No, let me share that one, because this is incredible. Let me just add that to the stream. I tell you what, you've got this thing about bitterns, haven't you?
Yeah,
You
I love bitterns, and there are bitterns in Europe. I've seen a lot of the Hungarian photographers actually
mm,
submit bittern shots. I'm not sure what species it is, but ours is aptly named the American bittern. It's not the most artistic shot, but the symmetry in this shot really stood out to me. I was actually in a blind in the marsh, and I was shooting up at this bird, and it launched straight in my direction. And getting that shot where you look at the wings, the eyes, the head, everything was very symmetrical, even the feet, which was pretty cool. If you photograph these birds in flight, they're very sloppy flyers. It's not aesthetically pleasing. This one actually stood out though. I'm like, oh, okay. And the colors are pretty cool too. There was soft light, so there was some purple
yeah.
tones in the background, which kind of matched the bird. But yeah, no, this was taken. When did I take this? I think it was this past spring, 2022, I should say, last year, last season. But yeah,
Because
this
I
is one
mean,
of my favorite bittern shots.
if people know, I mean, I think it's Eurasian bittern, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, again, another really sort of imaginatively titled bird. But if people know bitterns, that they're pretty similar, the American and the Eurasian bittern, in terms of their habitat and their habits, and they're really shy
Mm.
birds. I mean, to get this, I've never seen, I don't think, a bittern, coming straight at you in flight. I don't think I've ever seen an image like that.
Yeah, the female, I believe this is the male. This bird was bigger than the other, so I think it's the male. The
Yeah,
female was actually behind me in this blueberry swamp, so they were calling back and forth, and this bird was flying over my head to the female, which was probably maybe 150, 200 yards behind me. And again, a lot of it's patience. You get in there and you sit and you wait. And I was in there for most of the morning, a couple of hours, and then I
yeah,
got this flight sequence.
that's awesome. That is awesome. I bet you've earmarked that for a competition or two, haven't you?
Yeah, actually, I'm not even sure. I might have submitted this in one. Actually, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, it's pretty literal, but the symmetry is pretty cool.
Yeah, but I mean, there are some literal competitions out there, aren't there? And
True.
some have gone a little bit more literal recently, haven't they?
This is true.
No names mentioned. But no, this is super cool. I would have loved to have taken this. Even though artistic, the artistic sort of side of photography is what really gets me. For a literal shot, I would have loved to have taken that. That is
I have to
just
say the
so
30
cool.
frames a second that does not hurt either with these new cameras.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And the autofocus, which is able
Yes.
to deal with this sort of thing. Yeah,
Yep.
it's able to deal with this sort of thing.
And that was
Yeah.
difficult too because the bird was flying just above. You could see the grasses. It was a
Mm,
freshwater marsh, so you could see the grasses sticking up, and the focus can be sticky. It can go on the grasses and not the birds. So
yeah. Talking about bitterns, actually, this is quite apt because I wanted to talk a little bit about conservation, and the fact that last year, because I invested quite a lot of money, in the book, and we'll get to that in a minute, and also the new entry system. The competition didn't generate enough money to be able to support any conservation causes last year, which is a real disappointment to me. And I want to address that. Georgina Statler is working on a very specific conservation project, which I can't really say too much about at the moment because I'm talking to her about it, because I want WildArt to be involved in that, and I want WildArt to support that, because I think it is an amazing opportunity, and what she's doing when we share that with everybody, I just think is totally awesome. And it does revolve around a species of bittern they get in Australia. I can't remember which. Stupid of me. I should remember which species it is. But and it's all about a habitat, protecting a habitat, a specific habitat for that bird, and that's what I want to support this year with various initiatives, which revolve around the book, and I kind of get onto that. But I want to, she's free in a week or two. I think she's got quite a lot of work on with finishing a book and a couple of other commitments. But once those are done, we're going to focus on how WildArt can get involved and make sure it helps, a very specific conservation cause this year. And we'll work out how that's going to happen. And as soon as we've got the details of that and work that all out, then what I'll probably do is get her on, and we'll do a live presentation and put it out there and tell everybody what we're going to do. But it's really, really exciting. I think you did she say a little bit to you about it, Josh?
Yeah, she mentioned it, and it sounds incredible. And I have to say, I'm not surprised what's going on in Australia. Same thing with this bird right here that we have up on the screen. I mean, the decline in freshwater marshes and wetlands, it's all over the globe, unfortunately. And these birds have taken a hit everywhere, all types of birds. So.
And to be honest, it is all about habitat. It's the kind of the most important thing. And it's doing, as we were sort of talking, we talked about this, didn't we? When we had, was it Jeff from
Jeff Larkin.
Jeff Larkin on. And we were talking about the sort of connectivity between habitats and how important that is, when you're talking about conservation, because it's no good just protecting one piece of the jigsaw, because nothing else fits together. So you've got to protect it all to really do, to really do the best job that you can.
Especially for migrating birds, because there's multiple habitats, multiple locations, and if you break that chain.
Well, we should get Jeff back on again. Maybe we should get him on the podcast, actually.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. We should.
Yeah. Talking of the podcast, we've got another guest lined up, so we're going to record that very shortly. And Josh and I think we talked about photography in your backyard, really, didn't we, last time? And I think we're going to talk about travel photography next time. So.
This will be a great location too.
Yeah,
an iconic location, actually.
Yeah. Sunbitten, the bitten may be an Australasian little bitten. I can't remember. It's really stupid of me, but I mean, so much going on. Anyway, we'll get to that, and I'll get Georgina on, and we'll explain all. But it is what she is doing. That woman is just an amazing person. She's an amazing photographer, and she's an amazing person. And the energy she has is incredible. It's inspirational.
She just got a macro lens, Rob. She mentioned to me she bought the. I'm sure WildArt had an influence on that. I think she bought the Laowa. There's a name like the tube lens. It's like a pole.
Yeah, we've had a lot of images taken with that lens actually in the competition. Yeah.
Ripon Biswas had that shot of the fish in front of the waterfall.
That's right. Because of course it's that probe lens, isn't it?
Yes, that's the probe lens they call it.
Yeah. No, I looked at that and I thought, there's so many things you could do with that.
Yeah.
Well, amazing that would be. I mean, Francie, you could even do things with birds underwater with that, perhaps. The water birds and it. Yeah, think of those sorts. Anyway, we're digressing. So yeah, as is my want. Oh dear. Anyway, right. So opening dates. Let's talk about opening dates. So what I'm going to, you've seen the categories. So they close from the end of March sequentially as we go through, and they'll all be open at the same time. So you can enter, from when the competition opens. So if you wanted to enter the last category probably in about a week's time, you can. So they just close at the end of the month to which they're assigned to. So as we did last year. So the website is done. The entry portal website is done. And I just need to test the payment system on that just to make sure it's all working properly. Once I've done that, which will be this week, then what I'm hoping is by next weekend, we'll get it all open, and I'll send everybody an email, put stuff on social media just to let everybody know that it's up and running, but it will be within the next week. So, it'll all be open, and the entry fees will be the same as last year. And that's all still on the website. So, it's exciting. As Eli Porat says, exciting. Exactly. I don't know whether you're referring to the competition at Eli or the conservation cause that we've just been talking about, but either way, probably both, hopefully. But okay, right. What have we got next? Let's talk about the book. because a few people have been asking about the book. The thing is with the book, that I put a lot of money into collection one because I published this myself. So I put my own money into this, and you have to have a certain number printed to make it sort of make any sense financially, because all the money or a lot of the investment goes into producing the printing plates. So if you just produced 100 books, it would cost you a lot more per book than it does if I had 1,000 done, which I did. So you need the economies of scale, and you need about 1,000 copies to make it work, to make any sense at all. The problem that we've had, number one, is out of 1,000 copies, we've not sold 200 yet. And I think there's a combination of issues there. And I think the main problem for people is the cost of the postage, because most people are buying from overseas. So if I'm sending to Australia, for example, it's probably £35 for the postage and the packaging. And when you're thinking the book's £35, that's £70 if you want the book. So that's, and I understandably putting people off buying it because it's a hell of an investment, even though it's a cracking book, and it is a cracking book. But there's nothing that I can do about that because, again, I don't have the economies of scale that a larger distribution network would have, and the costs that I'm charging are the costs that I'm incurring. I'm not making any money on it. In fact, I'm probably losing, because the other thing to take into account is that when you take payments through PayPal or the credit card companies, they charge you. So that your £35, I've got to pay my time for actually putting the book together, which took weeks and weeks and weeks of work. I've got to pay the printing costs, which was a lot of money. And I've got to pay the credit card payment provider. They take their chunk. So everybody's taking a chunk. And it gets to a point where I've got to sell probably 500 books to break even. So you can see where it's coming from. So I need to sell that amount to be able to self-publish again. And the whole point about self-publishing was that we controlled the content entirely, and we controlled where the thing was printed. So I was very conscious of not supporting economies that don't give, excuse my French, a crap about the environment. And I wanted to keep the carbon footprint low. So I didn't want to go somewhere where I was going to have it shipped halfway across the world, which meant that there's an additional cost for that. And it simply doesn't work, having sold 200 copies of the first book, to have to put another. And the other thing to say is that the costs of printing have gone up significantly in the last year. With what's been happening in the economy, the war in Ukraine and everything else has had this devastating impact in terms of inflation, as everybody's been experiencing themselves. So that hits the printing industry as well. So I couldn't have it done for the price I had it done last year. It's going to cost me a lot more. So the economics, unless I get a publishing deal, which I was very close to getting actually this year, it's not going to work as a printed product. And I want to use the book as a way to help Georgina with this conservation project and future conservation projects as we go through the competition. So what I've decided to do this year is that we're going to do a digital version. So I'll start putting that together basically now. So we'll have that, I would think, during March at some point. So as we're coming towards the closing of the first category for this year, that digital book will be available. I'll have worked out with Georgina what we're going to do in terms of supporting her, and the proceeds from that, it'll be a lot cheaper, number one, and it'll go all around the world for the same price. And the proceeds of that, I want to help Georgina 100% with this project. So once I've worked out the details with her, as I said, I'll let everybody know. I also want to use the copies that we've got of collection one in the same way. So I want to cover my costs of production, obviously, and I want to help Georgina. So I think I need to work those details out. Once I've done that, I'll let everybody know. what the deal is basically. But it will probably involve a combination of the two books, and direct help for Georgina. But that basically is where we're at with the book. The other thing that I'm going to do this year is continue to work on getting a publishing deal with an external publisher, so we can have a printed book, because I think that's the only way it's going to work. As I said, I was very, very close this year to agreeing, a deal with a publisher I've worked with before. But if anybody's got any publishing contacts, drop me a note, and let's talk. But so that's basically where, one of my tasks for this year. But I want to use the book to help the conservation causes. I think that's the most logical thing to do, because it creates clear separation. It's just a very easy thing to do, financially, to separate that out and say, right, the proceeds that come in for that net of all the costs can go towards helping that conservation cause, which I think is a really important thing, because I was disappointed we couldn't do anything last year. It just wasn't possible with all the investment I made and everything else. But anyway, there we go. But I'll let everybody. I said I'll let everybody know, once we get to the point where we've agreed how it's going to work, and we can give everybody more details of the project that we're supporting. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with everybody, actually. So.
I think a digital book would be exciting, Rob. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I mean, last year's entries and the winners, I mean, the highly commended, the commended. I mean, it's amazing.
It's going to be an awesome thing. I mean, I know people like a printed product. I like a printed product. But when you stop to think about it, the impact that has on the environment as well, in terms of the printing process, in terms of the postage, and all the, basically the carbon footprint that you have. I mean, if I want to send something to Australia, it's got to go on a plane, and you have this situation, or you can have this situation where, if you had it printed in China, for example, it comes from China, it comes to the UK, it goes from the UK, it goes to Australia, America, Canada, Europe, wherever it goes. Think about the impact that has.
Yeah.
And I think, we need to be, perhaps responsible, and actually think about how much more we could do for conservation by cutting the cost of production out, and then all the proceeds less the payment providers, cut, go to, or perhaps what we could do is you have a direct donation link. So you make a donation to the conservation cause directly. So we cut out the payment provider's fee, and then you get a copy of the digital book. I've got to work those details out, but that's basically what's in my mind, and that's how I want to work things this year. So we'll see. Let's share some more photography, and if anybody's got any questions on that or comments, I'm more than happy to answer those and deal with anything that comes up on that. So let's just remove that for a minute. Let me move those photo onto one of mine. Right, let's share that. So I told you one of them was dark. This is something that I took when Jennifer and I went away to Wales on one of our trips to Wales last year. And we stayed in this cottage that was on the side of one side of a valley, and the other side would go into shade in the afternoon. And we'd get these gulls and all sorts of things flying up and down the valley. But the thing about the herring gull is it was still illuminated by the light that was behind it, and hadn't gone over the top of the valley, behind the top of the valley at that point, but the rest of it was in shade. Then you've got a light colored bird, so you've got this really high contrasted scene. And I thought gulls were perfect for producing something like this, and I wanted to add it. So I took sort of shots with a faster shutter speed and froze the action. And then I wanted to get a little bit more creative and add another layer to it. So I added sort of motion blur in, and this one came out really well. I think it's my best picture from the week.
Very cool. What was your shutter on this, Rob? Like 1/15th, 1/20th?
1/30th, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. Let's have a look. Have I got?
I actually like herring
settings.
gulls a lot. They're very conspicuous birds, and they're confiding. They make great
Might have,
subjects, but
yeah, it might
they're
have
good.
been 1/15th actually. I think you might be
Okay.
right. It might have been 1/15th. I remember, I remember messing around with all sorts of different shutter speeds just to try and do something artistic. But obviously, I was panning along, and I had
Mhm.
the stabilization on the lens when I was doing it. So yeah, no, it's good fun. Right. Denise says, I'd be happy to pay a conservation donation. My suggestion is to tag it into the entry fee portal. Yeah, the problem with that is that then that changes. Yeah, it's not as easy as it sounds, because I did have that thought, but it kind of changes the way the entry fee portal is coded, and that in itself costs quite a lot of money to do. So yeah, we'll come up with something. We'll come up with something. Bianca Blanc says, great idea to support Georgina in a digital book. Yeah, I just think that all the proceeds then can go to supporting a conservation effort rather than having to cover printing costs and everything first. And it just makes it a bit more accessible for everybody that way. And I just think there are so many positives to it that, yeah. Anyway, I'm working on the details. As I said, as soon as I've worked it all out with Georgina, we will come and we will do a presentation on it, so everybody knows exactly where it's going. Sorry, Josh, I cut you off.
No, no worries. I was just saying, what was I talking about? Oh, herring gulls. This
Yeah,
shot
herring gulls.
actually could go in airborne. What it could go in abstracts. Couple of
Light,
categories, I think. Light, yeah.
yeah, those sorts of things. See, but I think this is an image, perhaps, which is one of those things which straddles a few categories and doesn't really fit, you know, brilliantly in any.
Hmm.
Airborne probably is one, but you don't see a lot of the air because it's, I've taken that sort of low key approach to it.
Maybe
So
motion. Motion would have been maybe the best
motion would have been a
category a
good,
couple years ago.
yeah, yeah, a couple of years ago would have suited that quite well. Yeah. So that's quite a good example, actually. This image is quite a good example of what I was saying earlier, when there are some times when things don't fit perfectly into a category. So you have to, there are sort of various trade-offs, and you think, would it go better in light? I probably put this in light because to me it's more about the light than anything else. But light's a very strong category.
Hmm.
Very strong category. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, amazing stuff comes in light.
Yeah.
I really like color too. Over the past 2 years, color is a great category.
We've had some amazing entries in that. And
Yeah.
and the thing about color is it's so open to interpretation. It's such a wide
Hmm.
category that we had so many different ideas. I mean, Jan's on there. You probably remember his image of the
Oh, that's right. That was in
yeah,
color. That was the
yeah, it
founder
was in
choice in color. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So it's from the first competition, you know, the sort of underwater, or the drone shot from above, with the
Oh yeah,
stingray. You
the
remember?
stingray. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
where it was,
stingray.
pretty sort of one. It was pretty much one color, but that was the whole point.
And,
So,
yeah, and then we had, I think there were like brown bears in Russia or Alaska with like
mm,
these yellow hoses, and then you could take just a, pretty plain animal, mix it in with, so yeah, you could be very creative in that category.
yeah, yeah. No, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes in there. Right, Ben Pullett says, "Are you going to do any shows this year? I remember that last year you were at Bird Fair." Oh, well, that's another thing, Ben. I mean, I love Bird Fair, but it was very quiet last year, and again, to do a show like that costs a significant amount of money because you need to pay for the stand, you need to pay for everything that goes on the stand, so you need to dress it and whatever. Then you need to get there, so it's all the fuel getting there, and then you need to stay in a hotel for 3 nights, at least 3 nights, and that's really expensive. So before you know it, you're spending £1,000 or more for just something really, really simple. So to get your money back on something like that it's just so difficult. And I've taken the decision this year that if things like that don't generate money, then all they do is they suck money out of the competition, which I can't use for other things like conservation. And that to me doesn't make any sense. if somebody paid for the stand, for example, which is actually what we used to have with bird photographers, Swarovski were very generous and they used to pay for that stand. So, the costs for us there were quite small, but I don't have that luxury, with this competition. So everything that I do with the show is, comes out of my pocket, and I don't want, I want this competition to do stuff for conservation. And if we're spending money and not making any profit from shows, then that's taking stuff away from from the good that we could be doing with it. And it was a good experiment last year, but I'm not gonna do that again this year.
I wonder
But
if
if
COVID had any impact, Rob, on the crowds last year. Do you think that was still an issue?
Yeah, I think, well, there were a combination of things. Number one, it was kind of a new show, for it was a new iteration of Bird Fair, if you like. So and it was done very, very quickly. The weekend was the hottest weekend we've ever had in the UK. I mean, it was 40 degrees in places. So people would, and the demographic for shows like that is most people are probably over 50. So, people didn't want to be out in that heat. They really didn't want to be out in that heat. So that didn't do us any favors really either. And the thing is, there are so many people exhibiting there, you get a bit lost as well. And people come along and they like to see, but they weren't buying a lot last year, which is what you need to happen. I mean, you need to sell books, you need to sell prints, because you need to cover those costs. But if anybody wants me to do any presentations to camera clubs or anything like that, I'm more than happy to do that, online or in person, depending on where it is. So do get in touch if you want me to do that, sharing some of the images that we've had in the competition or talking about competition photography in general. More than happy to do that. So do get in touch. Okay, so I mean, basically, the only other thing to talk about, I mean, we'll share a couple of other images, in a bit, is really the sort of community that this competition is all about. I've always taken the view that my frustration with photo competitions that I've been involved with and I've entered in the past is this sort of lack of connection with the entrants, this sort of lack of engagement with people, which is obviously something I wanted to address with the live events that we do, with the sort of general communication, which I like to try and keep up with people. I like to try and be a bit more inclusive. And that's what I'm trying to do with WildArt. It's not just about the competition, it's about the community. So, it's a Wild Vision, obviously the YouTube channel, it's the Facebook group, it's a Wild Read, which I'm going to do something with actually. I'm going to make a Wild Read into a blog, which is available on the website. So if anybody has any articles or things they want to contribute to that, then that'll be there for. It'll be there for everybody else to share photographic experiences, technical, tips and tricks and whatever they want to do, an experience you might have had on a trip, a general nature experience. That's the sort of thing that I want to turn that into something to give people a voice, which they can write an article and they can write, a post and share it with everybody, in the community. So I'm working on that. And obviously we've got the podcast as well, which seems to be, you've been getting some quite nice comments about, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of messages, on Instagram and some other spots, Rob, where people really like the discussion, and a lot of the stuff I think we've been diving into too. It's quite unique in the sense that it's not stuff that's normally talked about in a lot of wildlife photography circles, but that should be talked about. So ethics was one actually.
That was quite good fun. It was, but I think, and on a serious point, I think it's something that really does need to be talked about, as we discussed, on the podcast. And if people haven't listened to it, it's available on the website. If you go to the community tab, there's a drop down menu and you'll see podcasts there. So go and check that out. And it is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or whatever they call it these days. And what's the other? Google as well, whatever their podcast platform is. So it's available on all the sort of major podcasts. Search the Wildlife Photography Podcast, or for Josh and me, or whatever, and you'll find it, I'm sure. But we've been getting some good feedback on that. And if anybody's got any ideas of things that they want us to cover on the podcast or in a wild read or whatever, because I'm happy to write about things, we're happy to chat about things, then do let me know. Oh, Crystal's just said, love the podcast, learn a lot and appreciate it. Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, as I said, if you've got any ideas about what you want us to cover, then just let us know. We'll put it down on a list. I've got a list I keep writing things down on. I said we're gonna. Well, I've just agreed with Gail. Actually, we're gonna have Gail Bisson on the next podcast, and we're going to talk about her recent trip to Lake Kakini and the pelicans, because it's a very popular subject. A lot of people have been to photograph the pelicans and travel in general, and basically the her wanderlust, and which is something that you have as well, don't you, Josh?
Yeah, it's been tough the past couple of years overall. The world has changed so much, but it is great to experience new locations, no doubt.
Yeah,
and new animals. Yep.
Absolutely. Right, let's share another couple of images. I think probably I've got one next. I'll leave you to sign off with the last image, perhaps. I just thought I'd share this because this was my last image for 2022. And Jennifer and I had another trip to Wales. We love Wales, and we stayed in this cottage over Christmas, which was right on the beach. And if people know Wales, it was on the Gower Peninsula, which has a very special place in my past, and I just love the place. And so we stayed literally right on the beach. So we looked out the bedroom window in the morning, and all I could see was sea. All I could hear was the waves crashing coming through the window, and I could hear oyster catcher and curlew just calling this was rocks right outside the front door, so I could just crawl out of bed in the morning, pull on a set of wellies and old jeans and whatever, and go and lie in the filth and the wet, and the sun would come up behind when it did come up. We had a couple of sunny days. And this particular morning, we had just a lovely dawn, and the waves are coming in and crashing. And obviously the spray was coming up, getting backlit, creates all this bokeh. And these turnstones were sitting on this rock. And they're just sort of, they're quite confiding, these birds, as people, if people know this species will know. And I just like the way this guy sat right on top of the rock here. I like this little guy here, just in the gap. I like, the way this one's sort of pointing to the left. And I like all the bokeh in the background and all the sort of sparkles, of the spray in the foreground. I just, it
You've
just
got the one
appeals to
peeking
me.
out there too, Rob, which is pretty cool. I see.
Yeah. So it's I had a lovely time getting completely soaking wet. Oh, you mean this little guy here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had, and I think I did take some oyster catcher, and I had curlew as well, and it was a grey heron around. Cool. But it's the turnstones that were.
Are these ruddy turnstones, Rod?
Ruddy, yeah, they're ruddy turnstones.
Yeah, we have these. Actually, it's interesting. All three pictures you've shared are all birds we have on the other side of the Atlantic as well.
Yeah, it's they're sort of common between the two continents.
Yeah.
So are starlings, but they weren't there in the first place.
Mute swans, I guess, too. But,
mute swans. Yeah. So I just it's kind of one of my favorite images from last year. Actually, I think it's really growing on me. I think probably more than anything else, it's because of the location, and it has, it's sort of special meaning for me, because this was a place I went to when I was 16 years old, and I just finished my exams at school, and I went with a group of friends, and we got on a train, in our hometown, and with our bikes and with camping gear, and we took a train to Swansea, and we cycled from Swansea to this place, which is probably 25 miles, something like that. Camped for 3 weeks, and it was just friends having a blast. and just exploring, and that sort of freedom you get at that point in your life where you just finished school, and you've got no worries, and it's always been a special place for me ever since. And going back there was was really nice, and be able to share that with Jennifer was quite special.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
Do you notice, Rob, like, when you were there years ago to now, does there seem to be a change in the wildlife or less wildlife? Because I see that in a lot of locations that I visit here. There's just less.
Yeah, I think there's just less wildlife generally. I mean, don't get me on it. I mean,
It's sad.
I've really, I did a lot of fishing when I was younger as well, and a lot of those places that I frequented when I was a kid, small streams, small intimate water courses and things like that, they're pretty dry now with no devoid of fish, and they were. I mean, I can remember my first introduction to fishing. A friend took me. I was about 10 or 11 years old. A friend and his older brothers took me to this little brook, and the bottom of the brook was black with minnows, and we were just, I had a bit of split cane. I was right huckleberry fin,
Mm,
split cane, bit of line tie to the end, and just simple float and hook, and we were catching them all day long, just having a real blast. And I know that stream now is virtually dry. There's
mm,
probably nothing in it. Certainly, not that sort of rich, rich. Well, I mean, I came to find that it had really big fish in it as well, which I went on to catch, as I got a bit older and a bit more experienced. But none of that. I mean, all that sort of thing's gone. I know,
mm.
a lot of I've got Sky just come to say hello. You're going to come up. And the river systems that I fish, the chalk streams, in Hampshire and Berkshire, some of those have declined quite considerably, and actually partly due to an alien species from the US, which is the signal crayfish.
Oh, wow.
That's come over, and
Yeah.
that's decimated, some of the fish populations, and actually otters as well. I have to
Mm,
say, they've come in, and they've been quite damaging in certain places, because they come in and they take quite a lot of the big fish stock out.
mm,
So, there are pros and cons to otters. I love them, but
yeah.
they are quite impactful, as a species. So, yeah, a lot's changed. A
Yeah.
lot's changed. And
Makes you wonder what the future holds too. I mean, what did we pass the 8 billion mark on the planet? 8 billion people. That's a lot of people.
yeah,
Although
it's a
there's
lot of
going to be
people.
some demographic shifts over the next like 20 to 30 years. I wonder if that will have a positive impact on wildlife, hopefully. But
Yeah, I hope so. Well,
yeah.
maybe it's another subject for a podcast, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can talk about.
We might need some
Anyway,
economists in there for that one. But
yeah. Anyway, what have we? I got to share your last image, haven't I? Oh, there you go, and there it is.
yeah, yeah. This was taken actually right around this. I think it might have been this week last year. I was in Yellowstone in the
I
wintertime.
remember you going, yeah.
Ah, it was
Mm.
amazing. I've been to Yellowstone before, but never in winter, and I have to say, winter is the best time to shoot there. It's stunning. We came across this huge line of bison. They were actually crossing the road. This was taken from a road in Hayden Valley, and what I liked about this image compositionally was the line of bison are they're spaced out, and the bison up front is connecting with the ridge. So you've got the intersecting lines, and the one in the
Yeah.
middle has his tongue out. So there's a little bit of character there, but
Yeah.
you could shoot all day there, even when 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. The all that snow acts as a huge light diffuser, so you could actually avoid harsh shadows throughout the day. It's a pretty
Yeah.
amazing place, and I need to get back there in the wintertime. We tried for the wolves. They were I don't even think it would meet the tiny category, Rob.
Yeah.
They were that far out. So
Did you need a telescope?
oh yeah, more than that probably. But the bison were confiding. Obviously, they're all over, and they make for great
Yeah.
subjects.
Yeah, they do, and I love the contrast in the color as well.
Yeah.
You've got that very sort of white, high key sort of feel with the snow, and then you've got these warm tones with the bison themselves. I just, yeah, I love this. And as you say, the line is almost perfect, isn't it? It's
Mm.
such it's a really difficult thing to do. I remember taking a picture of when I was again, I was in Wales. Oh, there's no surprise there. Um, and I have to explain, my grandmother was Welsh, and I think that's probably where my love of that country comes from. But I took some common scoter flying against the mountains of Snowdonia in the background when I was out on a boat. And it's a group of 4, and the rear 2 are just overlapping, so they haven't got that space between them. And I'm thinking, unless I get into Photoshop and sort it out, which I don't really like doing, but it's an imperfection that bugs me.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the picture, but no, this is really nice, where you've got that space between all of the animals, and as you say, you've got that bit of character in the middle. I mean, it had to be the middle one as well, didn't it? I mean, it gives it some sort of symmetry, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's kind of cool where, you don't see shots often too. It stuck out to me where the foreground is actually brighter than the background or the sky. Normally the sky is always the brightest image, but when you could blow out the whites and the sky was, rather gray, it kind of reverses itself, which is a bit
it
different.
does.
Something you
As you say, I like the line, the line of the landscape here, and then the line of the bison goes the other way. It's kind
like
of
a
nice.
big arrow kind of.
Yeah, it's really cool. And JG said, that's amazing. Love the spacing. Great shot. So
thanks.
Probably a good place to leave it, isn't it? Anyway, so let's stop sharing that screen, and so basically that's it. That's sort of WildArt 2023. So if you do have any questions that you think of after the show, then drop me an email. I said I'm hoping to get things sorted and open by next weekend, but I'll drop everybody an email. I'll obviously put the the information up on social media as well, so you don't miss it. But look out for it. And all the new rules, but I don't think there's any real changes in the rules coming this year. They'll pretty much be the same as last year, but all the information will be on the website, so go and make sure you have a good look at that. But as I said, look out sort of next weekend, and we'll get those open, and all the categories will be open for you to enter, and they'll be closing off obviously March, April, and in sequence. So Josh, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing everybody's amazing work. So
no, it's going to be an interesting year, and so thanks for everybody's patience actually while I've been sorting this year's competition out, because I know everybody's been wondering what's going on and what I'm doing. But so thank you for your patience, everybody. I was just trying to sort out the final details and get it all done and dusted before I announce. So JG says thank you both, and Alan James says thanks Rob and Josh, great pictures. Thank you, Alan, and we look forward to seeing your pictures in the competition this year. I say go back as far as you like. It's absolutely fine. So we look forward to seeing those. Anyway, Josh, thanks again, and we'll sort out a podcast recording shortly, and
sounds good.
Get Gail on. But thank you, everybody. Let me line up the outro. So thanks everybody for watching. As I said, got any questions, then drop me an email or send me a message on Instagram or whatever. So and I'll get the competition open within the next week or so, and look forward to seeing all your images in WildArt 2023. All right, see you all soon.